All right. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're having a great week. Welcome to the 88th Friday learning session with College UX Design Community. Thanks to our members who joined the Zoom session today, and all our viewers and subscribers, thanks to them who are watching us live right now on YouTube. Um, so, talking about the week, I'm sure you all had a great week because if you're from India, I had a great week because the Indian cricket team is in the finals and I'm waiting for a great match this Sunday. So, keeping the fingers crossed as well for the win. All right, let's come to our session tonight. This is our live Ask Me Anything session with Prasad. And this is where we collect questions from the community and our followers. And Prasad quickly goes through those questions and selects about 10 most interesting ones that we answer during this live session. Also, in the meantime, if you have any question for Prasad live, please ask away in the chat section. And if time permits, Prasad will be happy to answer it. There is an update from the community as well. So we have recently run a poll on LinkedIn. And of course, you all know about it because most of you have participated already in the poll. So we have asked, given all the strategies are useful, what strategy would you prefer to take your existing UX career to the next level? Now, the options were strengthening core skills. The second option was take on additional projects. The third option was get certified by a UX platform. And very interestingly, 77% of you have selected strengthening the core skills as the most priority. And while 20% of you thought that taking additional projects would help, and only 3% of you thought that certification is necessary. Now, why I'm saying this is interesting because we have also received a similar question today for this session, and Prasad would address it in a while. The question actually came from Jasmine. So it's about university degree versus boot camps and online courses. And what's the future of it? That's the question. And that would be the first topic also for our discussion today. So without any delay, I would like to invite Prasad to take this virtual stage. And the first question goes from Jasmine. She is actually struggling with her internet a little bit, so I am going to ask the question. Prasad, over to you.
Sure, go for it.
All right. Let me quickly share my screen as well. All right. I hope you are able to see my screen.
Yeah. So I think the question that Jasmine was asking was, hey, what is the benefit of a UX degree from a university as opposed to doing a boot camp versus doing an online course, or are there other alternatives? Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this statement and break it down into multiple questions, sub-questions. The first question that I see in here is, well, what is the value of a degree? Okay, just if all knowledge being equal, if all these three courses gave the same knowledge, okay, is a degree somehow considered more valuable than a boot camp versus some other alternative, right? Or being self-taught or something else, right? The answer, especially at a global stage, is degrees are becoming less and less relevant. Right? Where companies are looking at is your ability to execute. So degrees are really important until it gets you to your first couple of jobs. Once you have those jobs, it's that body of work that kind of propels you forward. Okay? And what I would encourage you to do is, like, if you look at all the resumes of all the senior designers, mostly you will see a very eclectic background. People who have come from different backgrounds to come into design without a formal degree in design. Right? So that is also possible. Okay. Now, degrees in UX design have been a more recent phenomena, which is why you see the new crop of people having those degrees. So, to answer that first question, is a degree important to build a solid career or to get your first job? Well, yes and no. Yes, in the sense that it opens doors. If you say I have a degree in design, you are considered, the recruiters find it a lot easier to move your profile upwards. Okay. However, if you don't have a degree, it's not a negative. If you have a body of work that you can show, that's good enough. Okay. So that is assuming all knowledge in all the three frames, all the three different choices is equal. Okay. Now, the second question that is interesting is, well, what is the quality of knowledge that I would get from all of these three different things? Okay. And so I'm going to assume that all three things will teach all three choices will teach the same topics. Okay. Now let's look at how they're going, what the quality of knowledge is going to be. Okay. So let's go to the first slide. So what we have done is, personally, I really enjoy the University of Michigan, right? I think they have an absolutely fabulous program. In fact, it's probably a leading program in my book in terms of how they teach design. Okay, not just that, the University of Michigan, the School of Design is very closely connected to the School of Business, their business school, which is again a very top-ranked university. Usually, these are like the top 3-5 universities in the world. Okay. This is in my book a very, very solid program. Okay. So, and I've had a lot of people that have recommended into the program, as well as people who I know that have passed out as well. So it's, for me, I've also gone to the university. I've had a chance to interact with the students and all that. So this is like, I can't say too much about this program. So anyways, so let's look at the curriculum that this program is offering. Okay. And what I want you to do is I want you to notice the similarities and differences between this and what a bootcamp curriculum looks like. Okay. So the first one is, it says contextual inquiry and consulting foundations. Okay. So notice what it says. So there are like a set of required courses. So these 6 or 7 courses are absolutely required for everyone that's going through the program. Then you have to take at least 2 courses in the other side. And then there is a mastery course which you have to master. Okay, so it's the equivalent of foundations plus there is a optionals and there's a mastery, and then they have a lot of recommended courses that you can take. Okay, so ideally what you're going to be doing is you're going to take these 7 courses under required, plus you're going to take 2 plus the mastery course, and then you might end up taking 2 or 3 of the recommended courses. This brings it out to about 1.5 years. Okay. So now when you're looking at the required courses, contextual inquiry and consulting foundations. Okay. I want you to remember this because I'm going to come back to this statement. Okay. So, but now when you look at all of these things, this is great. So you've got at least about 10 courses that you need to do to graduate. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. So the way you're going to look at it is a 76-week program. Okay. You are spending anywhere between 40 to 60 hours a week. And I'm going to, and again, given that it's a university program, you're completely surrounded by people who are in the same program as you. So why it is 60 is you're probably, even when you're going out for, a party with your friends or you're going out for a drink or whatever, you're still discussing, you're still thinking about the same concepts. Okay. So there's a lot of time and energy that you're putting in understanding and integrating those concepts into your knowledge base. Okay. So essentially, you're going to be spending approximately about 456 hours per course by the time you graduate. Okay. 456 hours. And this is where I'm going to come back to the original point. If we go back to the previous slide. Okay. It says contextual inquiry and consulting foundation. So if you just look at that one statement, all their courses are outcomes. They are not focused on what is it that you will be learning. It is the outcome that you're getting. So you will be able to run a contextual inquiry. Well, if in order to run a contextual inquiry, you have to know how to plan your audience, right? How are you going to run your study? You need to be able to write out your, your study design. You need to be able to do that. You need to be able to create questions. You need to learn how to ask those questions. You need to learn how to analyze the data. So just that one course, contextual inquiry and consulting foundations, will probably have 6 to 7 concepts built into it that you have to learn in that matter of 456 hours. Okay, and that is the same with all the other courses. So essentially, if you take on average, there's going to be, for simplicity, it's not 6 to 7 is a very simple thing, but about 10 concepts that you have to learn for each of these courses. Then if you go on to the next slide, you're going to spend about 45 hours per concept. Okay, that is 1 week per concept. Even like just writing out a protocol is a 1 week job, right? Doing affinity diagramming is a 1 week job, right? Just to learn. Okay, 1 week is, you're talking 60 hours of thinking about it. Okay, so it's a 45 to 60 hour thing. So it is no surprise then that by the time somebody graduates, they're really, really good. Okay, so you're talking, the fees also is very similarly priced. It's about a $90,000 to complete the whole course. And of course, you're certified by a really awesome school, and you basically get an alumni status with that university. Right? Now let's look at what a boot camp offers you. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Now this is one of the, we got this off the web where we have to request the curriculum and all of that stuff. And this is a boot camp that promises that in 3 months you're going to be there. Awesome. Okay. Now look at all the material. Okay. Again, I'm not going to comment about the material as such, what they're going to teach you. I'm just doing the math. Okay. So when we are looking at this, you're saying you have to do UX fundamentals, you have to do prototyping, user interface and visual design foundations, working with the product team, UX in the real world. These are all the things you're basically learning. Okay. Now let's do the math on this. What does it look like? Okay. And by the way, also notice that here they're not teaching you concepts, or they're not teaching you courses, where it's like a combination of concepts. So when you look at the University of Michigan thing, those 10 concepts are all put together to drive an outcome. Okay. But here, each concept is taught by itself. Okay. So the question of when you're going to do everything together to drive an outcome is when you do your final project, or when you do a capstone. That is when you bring it all together. Okay. So I want you to actually think about it. If I taught you 5 different concepts or whatever, how hard or easy is it for you to bring everything together? When you start bringing things together, that's when the majority of the questions happen. Right? Learning a concept by itself is easy, but understanding how those concepts fit with each other is the challenge. And that is a common challenge with all of the short-term programs that you see. Okay. So now let's go on to the next slide. So again, assuming everything is equal, they're teaching concepts. Now, when you start looking at the numbers, it's a full-time 12-week program. That is 3 months full-time. That is 40 hours. And again, because it's a boot camp, you're probably going in there into the class, or it's online. And once you're done, you walk away, you're on your own. Okay. Now, it depends on the individual, whether they're going to form study groups or they're going to do the work on their own or whatever they're going to do. But this is the way it is. Okay. So you're talking 40 hours a week. So that's about 480 hours. Okay. So that means you're talking, there's a total of about 45 concepts. So you're talking anywhere between 10 to 11 hours per concept. That is the amount of time you're spending per concept, but you're not spending any time integrating the concepts. You're not spending any time thinking about how that works into a final outcome and all that stuff, you have no time to think about that, right? And again, even if they're teaching you, where is the time, right? And again, if I were to teach you, a simple concept that I take, for all the volunteers that are there, when I teach a concept to you and you actually go out and do that project and you volunteer and do that project, think about how much time it's taking you to understand that concept, right? And here you're saying you're going to learn one concept in 10 hours, done. Okay. And the cost is anywhere between $16,000 in the US. And again, in India, you're talking, I've heard courses go for as little as 20,000 rupees all the way up to 2 or 3 lakhs. Okay. So there's a range. Okay. But at the end of the day, this is the game. That's the math. Okay. Now let's go on to the next slide. So this is another one, which is a university. Okay, there's a university in the US that is offering this program, and they're saying, okay, I'm going to give you a university-led bootcamp course. Okay, now again, when you start thinking about this, now this is an interesting one because it's kind of a merger between a pure concept versus an outcome. Okay, design thinking is an outcome. UX interviewing is a concept. Okay. So you have two different frameworks, but again, they're kind of mixed in together. But again, without any comment on the content itself, let's look at the numbers. Okay. Here, this program is offered as a part-time 24-week. And again, all of these boot camps, by the way, the boot camp curriculum I showed you, literally every boot camp around the world takes it and copies it and runs it as its own. Okay. So this applies to any bootcamp anywhere in the world. You look at a bootcamp in Europe, and I've basically evaluated people's portfolios around the world, people who have graduated from these bootcamps, and I see a very similar consistency in the quality of the outcomes that I see from everywhere. Okay. So now if you're doing part-time, they're saying it's about 9 hours a week. If you go onto the website, it says 9 hours a week, and it's 24 weeks. Okay. So you're talking about 480 hours in 24 weeks. It's about 29 concepts. So you're spending about 7.5 hours per concept, which is even less than the other program, but it's costed at like 12K. And again, in India too, you will have multiple universities that will give you short-term courses and stuff like that. And again, this is what the math says. Okay. Any questions or any thoughts at this point? So what I want you to really think through this is, a really good program spends about 45 hours to teach a concept, right? And then you're comparing it with boot camps that takes about 11 hours to like a university-led boot camp that will take anywhere between 7.5 to 8 hours or whatever. You see the range. Okay. So the key question that you should be asking yourself if you want to learn, okay, is not whether, at least this is one of the key, it's not whether you will get to learn or not. Of course, the same content. If you ask me to teach you UX in 3 days, absolutely, I can teach you in 3 days, right? But the question that you need to answer is, how quickly can you learn? Okay. At the end of the day, you can only absorb a certain number of facts in a day. Okay. You can only understand and integrate and practice at a certain speed. If I asked you to create like 5 screens, it's going to take you X amount of time. That's not going to change. Right? So to practice takes you a fixed amount of time. To understand takes you a fixed amount of time. To connect all those concepts takes you a fixed amount of time. So it is not how fast the other person is teaching. It is how effectively you can integrate those concepts into your learning. That is the core thing that you need to be thinking when you're thinking about online boot camps versus a degree program versus anything else. Right? Does this make sense, guys? Just type in yes if it's making sense, because I see quite a few people have turned off their cameras, but I generally look at everybody's faces to understand whether you're understanding or you have a question or not. Thank you, Kranti. Okay. So then the question is, well, once you understand how fast can you learn, and you say my learning capacity is limited, right? I can only learn, let's say, 2 facts a day, and it takes me about 5 hours to practice it. Okay. Then the question is, if that is your ability, okay, then what is the difference between a degree program versus a boot camp? Okay. A boot camp will go really wide, but it won't go deep enough. So you will know all the terminologies, but if somebody were to ask you to execute, that's a big question mark. Okay. A degree program is going wide, but it's going deep because it's got the time. You have the time, you have the instructors, and you have the peers who are teaching you. Okay. So that is the question. The compromise that you're making when you're learning in each of these is how deep you are going. The breadth is fine. Okay. So then the question that I would like to ask you is, okay, there's a university model, there's a bootcamp model. Okay. Now, the university costs a lot of money, but you learn a lot. And again, I would not say that of all the universities, especially in India. I have a question mark. I have also, um, you know, my team can attest, as part of, running a studio, I've basically reached out to every design university in India. I've evaluated people from pretty much every university, and it's a hit and miss, right? And generally, when you look at a hit and miss, like, I could interview from a top university and I could be talking, and I'll find absolutely fabulous people, and I'd find people who are absolutely bad, right? And even from a bad university I go, it's the same way. Of course, the mix of fabulous people is different, but it is the same way. So then the question means is like, okay, so then if all the programs are having relatively similar mixes of good people and bad people, then it is not the quality of the program. It is the quality of the individual that is making the difference. Isn't it? So that is one of my biggest challenges when I start thinking about programs in India, is it's a lot of hit and miss. If you have the money, you go in, you pay for money and the time, you go in, you pay for the degree, you go sit there and you learn. But whether you learned or not is up to you. So that is where the question comes in. Okay. Now, this is where what we've been talking about in college is different. Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, what we are saying is, listen, if you have the time and the money, absolutely go to a university, right? That is my number one recommendation. Right? However, if you don't, right, let's say you don't have the time, you have to make money, you have to do something else, then the question is, how do you generate value to the company? Why should a company pay you a certain amount of money? Right? And again, this also comes back to the whole discussion with boot camps. If you can learn a concept between 7 to 10 hours, then if anybody can do that, then why should you earn the big money? Right? Why should a company pay you big money? Because anybody can learn. Right? So that is where the disconnect is. So when we think about this, if say this is how do you generate value to a company, there are 80 different tasks that companies want you to execute. Right? Go ahead, Achyut. You have a question?
Yes, sir. In the previous slides, in the combination, the university kind of a bootcamp that is being offered, there are programming languages that they are like kind of must-haves kind of a thing.
Correct.
Possible, could you please press on that issue as you go ahead? That's it.
Sure. I will talk about that towards the end. If I don't address your point, then I'm gonna, get back to you. Remind me, and I'll talk about it a little bit.
Definitely,
Okay.
sir. Thank
you. Cool. So there are 80 different tasks that companies would expect you to do. Okay. Now, what we have done is we have analyzed these 80 different tasks and we said, okay, what is the difference? So let's go on to the next slide. You realize that there are 40 tasks that companies say every beginner or somebody who's coming into my company, minimum viable product that I'm willing to pay a salary to is these 40 tasks. They should be able to do these 40 tasks. Okay. And then the other one is the senior professionals or the senior individual contributors who are able to the lead level folks. That is the remaining 40 tasks. Okay. When you're looking at the first 40 tasks, again, keep in mind, like, for example, I'll give you like number 37, okay, which is design engaging visuals. Okay. Now, it's not about creating awesome visuals and all that. Now, today, the technology has improved and, the kind of recommendation systems and all that, design systems and all these things have reached a level where the core thing is you need to learn how to implement a design system. If you can learn how to implement a design system, you will have hit most of the points that are required under point number 37. So you don't really need to, learn everything about visual design, typography, colors, layouts. Of course, you need to have a good foundation on it. But more importantly, you need to be able to implement using existing design systems. Okay. If you are able to do that, you are in a good shape. Okay. Now, if you understand typography, colors, layouts, and all that stuff, you are definitely much more valuable, but minimum standard is a lot lower than what you would imagine. Any questions or thoughts on this? Okay. So if you say okay, then I'll go on to the next topic. So go ahead, Kranti. You have a point or a question?
Sir, one question, like how did you approach while categorizing these tasks like between professional versus beginners? So just wanted to want to know about that. Yeah.
So a beginner is somebody who works under supervision. Okay. So we assume then that given a certain feedback, would you be able to do this job? Okay. So in this case, for example, number 37, design engaging visuals. If somebody gave you a design system, would you be able to create the page? Okay. Optimize an offline experience. Well, digitize an offline experience. Well, if somebody gave you a form, and we've done this exercise in our community, somebody gives you a form and say, now create a digital experience around that. That's a minimum. Right? You don't understand how that form will be used in the next page or the previous page, but on that page, you will be able to optimize that experience and create an online digital experience on that. Okay. So the assumption for a beginner is given feedback, can you execute? For a UX professional or lead level person, can they actually do it on their own? Given a larger problem, can they execute? Does that answer your question, Kranti?
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Cool.
sir.
All right. So if you say, okay, I'll go on to the next slide. Just type in okay, and then we can move on. Okay, I only have 4 okays, so there's still a lot of questions here. No? Okay. Cool. Now let's go on to the next slide. So then the approach is, if you want to do a time optimized manner, okay, each of these concepts, these 40 concepts will fall under 5 classes of concepts that you want to learn, or 5 outcomes you want to be able to deliver. Not classes, not 5 concepts, but 5 outcomes. Okay. The first outcome is pragmatic design critique. Okay. What does that mean? It means you would be able to look at a design or a product, identify problems on them, which is how to identify problems. Okay, that is the first rule. Okay. Then the second rule is then the second concept is, once you have identified that concept, the problem, can you identify the root cause? Okay. Once you have identified the root cause, then can you prioritize all of these problems? Okay. Once you have prioritized these problems, then can you communicate it to people? And there's a 5th concept that I forget, but there are 5 concepts when you're doing pragmatic design critique. Okay. So when you just do that, the pragmatic design critique. You're learning those 5 concepts and you're learning to integrate it. And at that point, if anybody was to give you a design and say, tell me what's going on with this design, you should be able to break it down, argue it, and give your feedback. Okay. The second one, using tools smartly. So using, just using your mouse and the keyboard and using all the features is not what I'm talking about. Okay. What I'm talking about is, can you do it smartly? Smartly is the keyword. Okay. So this includes concepts where you have to learn to plan your artifacts. Okay. You have to think about scalability. If you have to create 1,000 screens with the same visual language and with the same, what do you call style, would you be able to do that? Okay. If somebody asked you and you created 1,000 screen application, somebody asked you to change the color of a button, how long is it going to take you? Is it going to take you 1,000 hours or is it going to take you 10 minutes? Okay. So that is what I mean by smart. And these are the concepts that you have to learn is how do you plan? How do you create, different groups? How do you create different layouts? How do you customize stuff? That is the larger set of concepts that you need to learn under using the tool smartly. The tool itself, I would say, is not that important. It might take you 2 or 3 days to figure it out. But learning these concepts and implementing them is what makes the difference between a professional and a student. Okay. Next one, ideation and problem solving. Again, it's got 5 or 6 concepts built into it. And again, each one of these topics will take you at least 6 to 8 weeks to learn, right? Assuming 6 weeks to get really good at this, at each of the concepts, you are spending at least 20 to 25 hours per concept. Right? Anything less than that, you are not learning because you are limited by the amount of facts you can take it in and how much you can practice. Any questions or thoughts, guys? That's it? Cool. Okay. So let's go on to the next slide because this is what I'm going to talk about the professionals. Achyut, you have a question or a point?
Yes, sir. So these 5 modules that I'm seeing here, beside that, there are 40, but initially there were 80, right? So do they include all the 80 or how is the consolidation?
No, it's only the first 40.
Right. Okay.
Again, if I tell you to learn 80 things, there's no way. You need some experience before you start learning the remaining 40.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. So which is why I've broken it down into the first 40, which is for when you're starting off, and then the next 40 when you're getting specialized.
Got it.
Okay. So this is the equivalent of when you look at the University of Michigan program. Well, actually, no, there is no equivalent. So forget what I just said. Let's go on to the next slide. Okay. Now that you've got your job, you're practicing it, you understand all of these concepts. Okay. Now is the time when you're saying, okay, I'm going to become a lead. Okay. I need to be able to work without directions. So somebody tells me, this is the problem you're solving, and you're solving that. Okay. So if you notice, the kind of feedback is rationalize your ideas. So explain why your idea is better. Okay. How do you identify possible errors? So without making the mistake, how do you foresee that an error will happen here? Okay. So how would you design an experience? So if in the previous one, it is how would you design a screen? Here you are saying, how would you design a combination of screens that will give an experience to your user? Okay. So these are all the kinds of tasks that you would need to do as a lead or a strong individual contributor who's working without supervision. Okay. For these things, you would need to deep dive into interaction design, research, and visual. Okay. And this is where this is a lot more involved. So in the previous one, if you're saying you have to take about 20 hours per concept, in this level, you're probably spending about 40 hours per concept. Okay. And that is where you want to put the weight. So this is where the difference is. We are saying certain concepts are easier. It helps you get executing faster as somebody under supervision. But however, there are certain concepts where you cannot escape from committing your time. Okay. And that is where you have to give your time. Okay. And now actually, if you go back, this is the other interesting thing. In the previous one, the way this, if you do this correctly, the concept of, you go to the previous slide, Hoy. So here, in each of the 5 concepts, there is going to be concept of how do you effectively communicate your thought process, right? So if you're spending about 20 hours on that specific concept, 5 times over, you're spending 100 hours learning how to communicate. You understand the point? So the way certain concepts have been designed is the same concept will repeat in each one of those 5. Okay. When it repeats, you do it again and again. You learn the same concept again and again at multiple levels. You get really, really good at it. Okay. If you're doing, for example, ideation, you're doing problem solving, you will probably do that at each one of those 5 courses. Okay. So when you do that, you're doing 100 hours for each of those concepts. Okay. That is how you get mastery over it. The point is, when you get into a job, you need to be really, really good. You can't say, okay, those days are gone when you interview for a job and you say, sir, I'm here to learn. The company is saying, if I'm teaching you, then why am I paying you a salary? That's a very simple question. And especially as the economy struggles or the challenge, the money tightens with venture capital and all that, companies will have to think very hard about how long somebody is going to take before they're going to be ready to deliver in their company. Cool. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Now, when you come into each one of these, you're taking about 40 hours per concept and you're getting really, really good. So at that point, you are in the leadership. You're ready to get into a lead role. Okay. So I'm going to stop this presentation here. And I want to make sure that you understand this, because again, it's not a personal, a preference. I wanted to do it by the numbers. So you look at the numbers and you understand, wow, this is the difference, the practical difference based on what each of these websites are saying by themselves. Okay. Any questions or thoughts on this concept? And then, did I answer your question? So the question is, well, should I do an online course versus a bootcamp? Should I do an online bootcamp versus a bootcamp, or should I take a degree, or should I do something else? Does that answer that question for you guys? Hi, do we have any questions from YouTube?
We don't have any questions yet, but yes, I have a few responses from YouTube that it answers the question.
Cool. Awesome. So that said, I'm going to go on to the next question. Go ahead, Achyut.
So if we go through this mode of learning that we have seen here, if I have to compare myself with the university learned candidate at the end of my completion of the concept, where do you think I will be sitting at if I have to gauge?
Knowledge-wise, you would be good.
Right.
However, you would have to work harder to get the same opportunities as a university person.
So it's only in terms of opportunity we will be differing.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
But they make a huge difference. They make a huge, huge difference. Okay. Let's say somebody graduated from a top design school.
Right.
Okay. They start off higher in their career.
Yes.
They are surrounded by peers. And this is one of the things that is very, very interesting that people do not really understand or be completely downplayed. Okay. It is the kind of people that you're learning with. Who are your classmates?
Mm.
Okay. When you're learning alone or you're going to boot camp, okay, your classmates may have 100 things going on in their lives.
Yeah.
Okay. Motivation levels will be very different. Okay. So some classmates might be happy just to get a job. Okay. Some classmates would be happy to, to be able to just crack an interview. They're very different mindsets. When you talk into a university, you have a bunch of people who are super ambitious.
Right.
Right. because there's a selection criteria. This is the other thing. So when you look at most of these boot camps, the biggest challenge that, again, a lot of people talk about is if you have no input criteria. So you say, okay, you're sick. I want to learn in 4 weeks. Sure, you can learn in 4 weeks. Oh, you have a baby. So can I learn only on weekends? Absolutely, you can learn only on weekends. Where is the standardization, right? So if every student has different expectations, different input, different capability coming in, you're surrounded by people with different mindsets.
Right.
Correct? And so how do you grow then? That's a big issue, because when you see the people around you, somebody got a job, so in your mind, you think just getting a job is a big deal. Isn't it? So your aspirational levels themselves are much lower. When you go into a university program, aspiration, because you're part of a cohort that you've been sitting, even if it's a below average university, you're part of a cohort that you've been sitting with for 1.5 years. Right? And you know which people are good. You've made a group of friends and you're seeing one friend has kind of gone somewhere, done something interesting. I want to do something too. So there's an inherent competitive spirit that pushes us to kind of move forward, or that allows, oh, this guy was able to do something like this. Why can't I do it?
Right.
It opens our mind to possibilities. And that is one of the biggest weaknesses when you talk about a bootcamp model versus an online model, where you cannot really think about that possibility. Isn't it? And so that is where, again, I keep saying, like, community is the important part. If you surround yourself with people who are just as motivated, who are trying to push, and then you form a little group and you start spending that time, your acceleration will probably be just as much as somebody with a degree.
Yes.
Okay. So that is one of those things that I would want to say. And again, the other thing that I also wanted to say, if somebody comes with a degree, you're automatically, your resume is, let's say you have an IIT Mumbai degree. Right? There are certain companies that will only recruit from that university.
Right.
So automatically you get into that cohort. At least you get an interview.
Right.
Maybe the Microsoft or whatever is only going to recruit one person out of that cohort, but that's still good, isn't it? That one individual has an advantage that none of the other people will have.
Got it.
Right? Not in terms of salary or in terms of company, but when they join Microsoft, they're surrounded by, again, superstars, right? Each one of these guys are solid designers. You're learning, you're being mentored, you're growing. So again, it's your community that makes a huge amount of difference. So that is what I would say is, as you grow in your career, it is your community that is going to impact you. It is your mentors that will impact you, that will accelerate you. Does that answer your question, Achyut?
Yes, sir. Perfectly on point. It answers. Just one small thing. So to bridge this gap, I have a good body of work, let us say, and I'm getting the best out of the knowledge system that is here. So would networking add on to, kind of that opportunity gap?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You must network.
Right. Right.
And not just network at a national level. You should network at a global level, because we are in a global environment. That is the other thing that is changing. Okay. We are now magically, because of the pandemic, we are now all magically working in a global environment. So we are competing not with somebody in India. If you're going for a job in some company, I'm interviewing you, I'm probably interviewing somebody in Colombia, I'm probably interviewing somebody in the US.
Got it.
Right. So then my question is, well, what are the pros and cons of each of these individuals? That's how I'm thinking about this, isn't it? So you can no longer afford to be competing at your local level or at an India level. Those visa regime days are gone.
Yeah.
Right. So that is why you need to be part of these groupings where you are, thinking internationally, thinking different, and bringing them all together. So that is one of those areas that you definitely need to spend your time on.
Yes.
Cool. And then finally, the last question that you'd asked, Achyut, was programming. Is programming important to become a UX designer? Now, that is one of those areas that I completely disagree with that university, because, see, the thing is, again, if you look at even some of the top universities in India, okay, most of these universities try to teach you ergonomics. Okay. Now, till date, like before virtual reality, okay, ergonomics was not that important. Right? There are other topics that would be more important. So I'm not saying it's not important, but there are other topics of relative importance that are more important to be taught. Right? So, but generally what universities will do when they're designing a courses, they will look at all the professors and say, what can you teach and what can't you teach? We will put what you can teach into the curriculum. What you can't teach, we won't talk about it.
Got it.
So the curriculum in many ways has a loose connection with what the industry wants, but a tight connection with what the professors can teach.
Got it.
You understand? And that is where, if you think about, if you've always wondered when somebody graduates out of a university and they still have to train to get into the job, well, why do they need to train?
Yes.
The reason is how prepared is that professor to teach something that the company wants.
Got it.
And that is the practical aspect when you start thinking about it. So from the engineering perspective, yeah, they probably had a professor that could teach engineering. The other aspect also is, I mean, this is also a huge difference that, you know, you yourself will notice for people that are part of the college community versus people who have been in other parts of the communities, right? In other communities. The difference that people will notice in there is this, okay? In our community, we don't focus on tools. We don't talk about tools. We talk about a strategy of solving problems.
Yes.
Right? We talk about frameworks, right? But the problem with that is, if I were to ask you after 3 months, like, what did you learn? I don't know what I learned. I learned a strategy.
Yes.
Versus if you went to a boot camp or wherever, you say, I learned Figma, I learned 5 tools, I learned 20 tools. It's very easy to quantify, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that is the core difference also when you're thinking about it. It's like, why do some universities on that put those there? Because it's very easy for you to feel excited. I know 20 tools. But then when you get to an interview, you realize your tools are not as important. That's when you kind of, oh, okay, what do I do now? Right? And I think that is the challenge that we need to start thinking about when we are thinking from a university perspective. So again, university education, again, is not in itself perfect. There's a lot of evolution that is happening within universities. But, some of the best universities that I know of do the case study method. Okay. Where you're talking what is going on in the universe, in the industry. They'll write a case study. You'll sit down, you'll discuss it. You're spending at least about 20 to 30 hours discussing a case. And you go into the room and you discuss that case with the professor while the CEO, the guy on whom the case is written, is sitting in the classroom.
Nice.
They are observing you from the company. And so what you're talking, by the time you complete all your discussion, that individual will come down and they'll say, this is what I did in my job. Now that's a radically, improved way of learning.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, cool. So does that answer your question, Achyut?
Perfectly, sir. Thank you so much. There's a lot of clarity.
So let me see this comment that came through. So
There is a
Hoy, can you read it
question
for me,
from,
please?
yeah, there's a question from one of our YouTube viewer, and
Okay.
his name is Kishore. He's
Okay.
asking, what do you think about data visualization design?
What do I think about data visualization? It's important, right? And it's going to be a part of our lives, no matter what. It is going to be a part of it, right? Because as we start creating systems that are built on data, where you have to visualize a lot of information and all that stuff, especially visualization is absolutely critical when you're thinking dashboards. And dashboards, designing that, there are like 5 or 6 things that every designer needs to learn. Okay. And one of those things is designing dashboards. And under dashboards, data visualization is an absolutely critical component that you have to learn. So again, the data visualization is a concept that goes towards an artifact. So don't think about a concept level, think about the artifact. What is the artifact? Am I designing a search experience? Am I designing, even search is data visualization in some ways. Am I designing a dashboard experience, which is also data visualization? Am I designing, let's see, a landing page experience, which is also in some ways visualization? So again, there are many different flavors of data visualization, but it's a concept that every designer needs to know. Cool. So any other questions, guys? And I want to take Achyut's question after this because that is a very interesting follow-on for this theme about how to learn UX. Because again, the world is changing in many interesting ways, but let's have Achyut ask his question. Achyut, what's your question? This is one that he submitted before.
Yes. So there are two questions, but I'll go with the first one. Like, what can we address, the enterprise UX thing or the noise around it?
I will take that afterwards. Ask your other question because that is much more interesting.
So I wanted to understand the noise that is around the internet currently from a beginner's point of view. When I go there and see UX over and things like that. Or UX.
Hi, can you share your screen with the post that Achyut was talking about? So I want people to understand what people are talking about. So I think the question that Achyut is asking is, people are saying UX is dead. Okay. Is it really dead? Okay. So while Hoy finds that post, the answer to that is, let me put it to you in a slightly different perspective. Okay. Engineering. Okay. When Google basically started building out its search engine, they literally brought their motherboards together, they put chips and all that stuff, connected it, built their own servers, and then they hosted, they built the whole search engine based on the hardware that they designed on their own. Okay. What is different today? Well, you no longer design hardware. You could just go on AWS or Google Services, Google Cloud, and say launch, and your hardware is ready. One button click and your hardware is ready. You could argue that the opportunities for hardware engineers has gone away. Well, actually, not really. What has happened is the hardware engineering has become a much more specialized thing. If somebody is doing cloud computing, it's a specialized field that people are working on. Okay, it requires a lot more knowledge and it pays just as much as well. Earlier, you used to be a generalist. Now you're a specialist. Okay. Now, the same thing when we start thinking about as UX did. Okay. Now, here's the simple thing. UX research is a waste of time. Okay. Why UX research is failing. And in some of these articles, I've taken the time to read it and, think about them. Now, what is interesting is when you look at all the people that are doing design, okay, in your company, for example, if you have to do design and somebody to give you a task, how many of you will say, listen, I need to do research? How many of you are going to say that? Just raise your hand. Or just say yes. My suspicion is a majority of us are probably going to say yes. But what are you going to research? Okay. Because design has become so much more, mature, there's a lot of knowledge that's already existing there. So if you say, I'm going to reinvest and I'm going to reinvestigate whether blue color works with green, there's a lot of body of knowledge that's already there. If you're not aware of that and you're saying, I want to reinvestigate that, of course, research is useless. Because you're wasting a lot of time and no company would be willing to invest in your time in that case. So what is important is not asking every question to the user, but figuring out what questions do we already have answers for, what questions do we have data for already, and what questions do we need data for in the future that we do not have data for. Understanding the difference is important. Okay. And that is one of the, I think that's what is user research is a waste of time. I specifically read that article. And I think that's what the author was saying. It's like, doing research for everything is a waste of time. Okay. Doing research for the few questions that you have prioritized that do not have existing answers that are going to significantly impact your product, that is important. Okay. Now, the second question is, UX is dead. Okay. So let's talk about it, juniors. Okay. Now, I have not read that article. But again, my point is, again, when somebody is coming at a junior level and all they're doing, if you're looking at the bootcamp curriculum or even what the curriculum I've showed you, most of these guys come in, the need for specialists is increased. But most of these curriculums are still teaching you coding. Okay, so what is the difference? You are going to be a specialist, but they're trying to teach you to be a generalist. Okay, so there's a problem there. And so that is again where the challenge comes. Now, if you look at product managers today, product managers have user acceptance testing as part of their curriculum. Now, user experience curriculums are kind of getting diffused to other places, partly because, and again, other practitioners may disagree, but for me, I believe that designers themselves don't know what is expected of them. Right? When I don't know what is expected of me in a work environment, of course, other people, if they do my job, I'm okay with that. Okay. So part of the thing with becoming a specialist is knowing exactly what you should do and delivering all that promise. Okay. And that is what is the critical thing. So again, I think to the point that Achyut is making, no, UX is not dead. However, it is specializing. Okay. And people who are specialists, who understand, who can deliver at that value, and even for experienced people, that's the same deal. People who can deliver at that pace and that quality, they're always going to be evergreen. Okay. But if you're going to say, I'm going to take pieces of wood and I'm going to try and create the Google server as it was at that point, well, you're talking 20 years ago. You would have a job 20 years ago, not today. Does that answer your question, Achyut?
Yes, sir, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So let's get to the next question. So there is one other question which says, Pranav is asking, I'm pursuing a Google UX design certification for 6 months. Is it worth my time? Again, let's think about this in the framework that I explained earlier. Okay. Does anybody have a feedback on that question before we start?
I do have, sir, a doubt to add on.
Go ahead, Achyut.
Now, this is very interesting. Google itself has curated that course, but there is, if I do that course in a better way, Google is going to promise me a job. So that's an interesting scenario, which makes me doubt the content. Nothing, no bad intentions, but if I want to invest my time, then would you, the content provider, actually give me a door if I do it well?
So let's actually think through this. The curriculum has been created by industry professionals who do this day in and day out. Okay. And a lot of these guys are highly paid. So the quality of the curriculum is awesome. It's amazing. Right. I mean, if you read the curriculum and you just understand what is being said correctly, it's gold. Okay. However, but there's a challenge. Okay. So it's the same thing as, me watching cooking shows on TV, on YouTube, and say, man, I know how to cook biryani. And then I start cooking biryani. What happens? I murder it. What was the difference between that YouTube video and my cooking? The difference was practical experience. Okay. And this is what in learning systems, we call it knowledge, application, execution. Okay. When you're teaching something, first you understand the theory of it. Okay. It should be, so heuristics, there are 10 heuristics, that is knowledge. Okay. If I asked you what is recognition rather than recall, you're repeating it back to me. Good. That is knowledge. Okay. Application is, okay, so now here's a screen. Can you tell me which heuristics are violated? Okay. So you can say, okay, yeah, these 5 heuristics are violated. You are applying it in a constrained environment where I'm giving you a safe environment where the cost is low. Okay. Execution. When you're in a work environment, I ask you, now give me a critique, because what your recommendations will either kill our product or double our user base. Now give me a recommendation that will make a difference. There it is no longer constrained, because that one screen can be affected by 20 other screens. Isn't it? That one error that you identified may be affected by 20 other errors coming from other places. So in that scenario, not only do you have to look at it, not only do you have to identify a heuristic, you also have to prioritize the heuristic. Once you prioritize it, you have to convince your team members that that is the correct reason why you need to go figure it out, because otherwise your product is going to die. So that is execution. Okay. The Google certification is awesome when it comes to knowledge. Okay. But when it comes to application and execution, you need somebody to tell you that you made a mistake or you got it right. If you do not practice applying that knowledge, and you don't practice executing, chances are you still have the book knowledge. Now, in order to execute, you still are going to make a lot of mistakes. Right? And that is the problem. And that is also the problem that Google certificate, when I look at the feedback, I see that feedback coming from Google courses. The material is awesome. However, who is evaluating you? Is it somebody who's been in the industry who's doing awesome work, or is it somebody who's just, your peers who are evaluating you? So you might be somebody who just graduated, or who just looking at it today and you're evaluating, or somebody else has got 10 years of experience. At the end of the day, when everybody gives you feedback, you don't know the difference between an experienced feedback versus an unexperienced feedback. Right? Ultimately, you're getting a certificate for watching all those videos, but really, are you able to execute or not? Is still a big question mark, isn't it? And that is the core challenge with UX, the Google certification programs. Okay, is amazing concept, amazing content. However, will this person be able to execute after they complete it? That is where the challenge is. Okay. Cool. And then there is another question from Pawan from YouTube. So which is, how can we stand in competition to people who have university education, and most of the opportunities are in the hands of university? That's actually not true, Pawan. The global surveys indicate that 60% of designers in India are self-taught. They do not have university degrees. Okay. The same thing in the US, I've seen some number like equivalent to about 40% of designers are self-taught. Okay. So the point is not that you will have less opportunities, but the point is you have to fight a little bit more. Okay. If you want to get noticed, you have to fight a little bit more. You have to kind of network a little bit more. You have to get the word out a little bit more. So you just have to do it a little bit more. Okay. But again, we've also looked at people who are university degrees and self-taught, and we looked at their career paths over time. Okay. Most people who have, no, maybe not most, but a significant percentage of people who have university degrees, especially in India, okay, over time tend to stagnate in their careers. The self-taught people tend to accelerate much faster, because the self-taught people learn how to hustle, they learn how to learn, they're learning every day. Whereas the people with formal degrees generally say, okay, I've got the degree, so you need to respect me for my degree, not because of what I'm delivering. So over time, they hit a glass ceiling. Okay. So Pawan, yes, while a university degree does offer certain advantages, we've also seen long-term advantages for people who are self-taught and who are kind of pushing themselves every day because they go higher in their career as well. So I hope that answers that question. So Kranti, what's your question?
Hi, sir. I have two questions actually. So I'll begin with my first question, which is, what is the quickest research method one can use to validate a new business or product idea? This you partially answered, like what answers we have for our immediate requirement, and for what questions we don't have answers. But can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. And what I did was I selected all the questions that were going around the theme, just so you understand. The theme is, how do you integrate concepts with each other? So they'll say, okay, so if I was to answer it, and again, this is something like if I did not know how to connect the dots, and I'm just looking at what is the fastest way to do research? Well, the fastest way to do research is do an A/B test. Okay. Or do unmoderated usability studies. But that answer is not correct.
Yes.
The reason is because on the ground, you have different capabilities. Okay. So for example, if you're working with a website or with a company that has millions of users,
Yes, sir.
Right? An A/B test might be really fast.
Okay.
Because, to get 10,000 people to see a screen and immediately use it or whatever might be a matter of a day.
Okay.
Okay. However, if you don't have the millions of users, an A/B test might take you infinitely long time.
Yes, sir.
Because you will never get statistical significance. Okay. Now, the other issue is, well, A/B test will tell you, well, and this is where I say, is understanding what each of the methods are and understanding what is going on the ground and figuring out how to connect those concepts together to create something that works. Okay. So then you might say, well, okay, well, if I do an A/B test, even if I have millions of users, the problem is I know what people did, but I don't know why they did it.
Yes.
Did they not click on it because they didn't like my content? Or did they not click on it because they didn't notice the button? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right? So then that is where you need to do some kind of qualitative studies.
Okay.
Right? So this is where you want to basically look at, well, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? And what is the resources that I have available to me? And what is the trade-off I have to do? And using that, you're trying to find the best method. But as such, there is no one method that you say, okay, just do this and you'll 100% get the right answer in the shortest possible time.
Yes, sir.
I wish I could say that, but it's not there.
True, sir. Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you want to do unmoderated studies, now that's interesting because it costs you money.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So you're spending money to do like maybe 100 people and you get data very, very quickly, but you're going to spend quite a bit of money to kind of collect that data.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there are trade-offs for each of those methods. And again, you have to figure out, do I have money? Do I have time? Do I have users? Do I have, do I need to know why? Do I need to know what? So those are the kinds of questions you figure out and then you execute. You find the appropriate method for that.
Yes, sir. So, and also one follow-up question for this, sir, like when one is working with a company where pushing the products into the market and measuring them is crucial rather than figuring out things and making it fail-proof and then releasing into market. So in that case, when PMs are coming up with a brief, like having features copied from competitors and making it it as their own, I mean, our own product. So in that scenario, how to handle this? Like, so that's the one more follow-up thing.
See, again, I think the way you would want to approach it is, well, if they're just saying copy it.
Yes.
The simple question is why? What is the outcome you're trying to achieve? So you want to move the conversation away from features to what is the problem you're solving.
Yes, sir. Like,
Okay.
to make it simple, can we take the analogy between like how Facebook is copying and killing their competitors? Like, Threads is something they are obviously it's a copy of Twitter, which everyone knows. Can you talk around that? Like,
well, again, you can copy it if you have a dominant market position. Okay. If you are the number one guy where you say, okay, 50% or 60% of the traffic is coming through to you, absolutely. If you copy it, you can just move the traffic over and then you can get going. If you're not the market dominant person and you're copying,
yes, sir.
the challenge that will come is people will say, well, what is the difference between you and that product? So you do not have a differentiator. Okay. When you don't have a differentiator, then all products being equal, they will continue on with their old habits. Okay. So, but again, these are all deeper questions that you need to be thinking about. But the larger question that you need to be thinking about is having that conversation, an intent-based conversation with your peers. Well, what is the problem? What is the goal we want to achieve? And why do we want to achieve that? If we can answer that, then your peers will also realize, well, actually, if that is the goal and this is the reason, then this doesn't work, isn't it? If you're saying I'm not a market dominant company, but I want to just copy the features, and you say, well, why? What do people think about you? Nobody knows. You are no different from anybody else. Then you understand the intent. The conversation is a lot easier.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So I think we are out of time. But one thing I would want to say is we are in the process of setting up a Udemy course with just those 5 things, the five courses that I talked about. We're in the process of setting something up. If you're interested and you want to be invited, we are going to share a link with you, and you can just let us know if you want to be informed, and then you'll get an email when the course goes live. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, guys. Have a great weekend and talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye-bye.